Stand by for the final descent as we prepare for the last two critical briefings regarding the complex nature of warfare. Up until this specific moment, we have operated primarily in the abstract, while exploring the high-tech systems of modern combat. Our team analyzed the sophisticated blueprint of invisibility and decoded the deadly kill box created by advanced electronic warfare technologies today. Together, we have witnessed the absolute pinnacle of American aerospace engineering and the sheer destructive power of these flying machines. However, we must eventually acknowledge that even the most advanced engineering has a hard limit in the face of physical reality. Massive air power can effectively destroy a static target, but it simply cannot occupy or hold ground for very long. Lethal air power can certainly kill a heavy tank, but it cannot ever truly kill the stubborn human will to fight. For 38 long days, we rained devastating fire from the stratosphere and assumed the enemy regime would soon totally collapse. We believed that if we destroyed enough hardware, victory would be inevitable. But our strategic assumptions were ultimately proven wrong. Modern war does not ever truly end on a glowing radar screen or within the digital confines of a computer. You cannot simply accept a formal surrender via a secure data link or expect the enemy to quit without physical presence. You cannot occupy a sovereign capital city with a smart bomb, and you cannot plant a national flag with a missile. Eventually, the elite pilots have to go home, and the sophisticated sensors must inevitably blink off at the mission's conclusion. The sterile standoff distance of the cockpit collapses into the dirty, brutal reality of the ground where the real war lives. Here is the strange paradox of February 1991. Where the skies were clean, but the ground still belonged to them. Buried deep beneath the burning desert sand, the elite Republican Guard was waiting for the inevitable ground invasion to finally begin. They possessed thousands of heavy tanks and hundreds of thousands of dedicated soldiers who were well prepared for a final stand. These forces were dug in deep, making them immune to our sensors and invisible to our sophisticated thermal imaging sights. Saddam Hussein was betting everything on a simple variable called friction to slow down the relentless American military machine's progress. He didn't need to defeat the United States Air Force. He just needed to survive the initial onslaught of the bombing. He believed that if he could force the United States into a conventional tank-on-tank battle, the technological gap would close. He desperately wanted a fair fight. But a fair fight is the one thing the United States military completely refuses. While the Air Force was hammering from above, the United States Navy was engineering a kinetic trap to change the equation. To do it, we executed a strategic fusion that defied history and combined the old with the very new technology. We took the oldest, heaviest capital ships ever built, which were forged in the intense fires of World War II combat. Our engineers then worked them with the first generation of battlefield robotics to create a terrifying and unstoppable hybrid force. We turned the coastline into an anvil so the army could swing the hammer against the trapped enemy forces. This is the story of the descent and how the Navy turned the ocean into a fortress for the final sentence. If you are ready to decode the engineering behind the history, secure your connection and subscribe to the briefing right now. Now please set your altimeter to 0, because to understand how this trap was sprung, we must first analyze the water. To understand the violence that was about to unfold, you have to analyze the battle space through the lens of the adversary. The opposing command structure knew it could not survive a symmetric engagement in the open ocean in the deep blue water. American nuclear submarines and carrier strike groups possessed near infinite tactical depth that the enemy simply could not hope to match. So the adversary adopted a doctrine of A2AD, which stands for anti-access and area denial. To protect their own territory, they conceded the deep ocean and withdrew to the green water, which is the shallow, chaotic zone along the Kuwaiti coast. They turned the shoreline into a kill sack and constructed a multi-layered defense network designed to negate our massive technological advantage. 11 infantry divisions dug hardened fortifications in the limestone caves along the coast to wait for the arrival of our fleet. They concealed mobile Silkworm anti-ship missile batteries operating in total radar silence to ambush any of our high-value targets nearby. But the most effective weapon in this denial strategy was not a missile. It was the poor man's nuke, the mine. The adversary seeded the waters with over 1,300 mines, which included the dangerous Italian-made Manta bottom mine systems. From an engineering standpoint, the Manta is a total nightmare for a surface fleet, because it does not float on water. It buries itself deep in the silt of the seafloor and waits patiently for its unsuspecting target to pass by closely. It is a smart weapon, utilizing acoustic and magnetic sensors to profile the specific signature of a large ship's steel hull. It waits for the pressure wave and the magnetic disturbance of a steel keel before it decides to trigger its explosion. This is asymmetric warfare in its purest form, where a cheap weapon can potentially destroy a very expensive and modern ship. A single Manta mine costs approximately $2,000, while a modern Ticonderoga-class cruiser costs over $1 billion today. If that mine detonates, the exchange ratio is 500,000 to 1, which is a devastating mathematical reality for any commander. The strategic logic was sound, as it forced the Navy to operate in a minefield and bleed the fleet with explosives. Faced with this density, the High Command faced a binary choice regarding the best way to handle the upcoming coastal assault. They could attempt a costly amphibious landing, or they could exploit the adversary's extreme fear of that specific type of landing. They chose the latter and codenamed the operation the Great Deception to fix the enemy's forces at the coastline during combat. The objective was to leave their western flank, the open desert, exposed for the Army's massive and decisive armored hook maneuver. But you cannot simulate a naval invasion on a simple spreadsheet and expect the enemy's intelligence network to believe the lie. To make the data credible, the Navy had to generate physical signals that would be picked up by the enemy sensors. We had to make significant noise and order battle groups to steam aggressively into visual range of the heavily fortified shore. The battleships USS Missouri and USS Wisconsin began a sustained and heavy bombardment of the shore to sell the fake invasion. Navy SEALs executed covert demolition raids on the beaches to simulate pre-assault clearing operations and draw the enemy's attention toward them. The acoustic and thermal signatures generated by this massive fleet were overwhelming for the Iraqi command structure during the tense standoff. The adversary's command structure completely froze in place as they kept their divisions dug in deep on the fortified beach. Their eyes were fixed intensely on the horizon while they waited for the massive amphibious invasion that they believed was coming. However, generating this powerful signal required the American fleet to accept extreme risks just to sell the elaborate tactical lie. The ships had to sail directly into the dangerous engagement zone, where thousands of deadly naval mines were hidden beneath. On February 18, 1991, the kinetic bill finally came due when the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli struck a contact mine. The massive chemical explosion tore a jagged hole measuring 16 feet by 20 feet in her vulnerable starboard hull that day. Just minutes later, the advanced Aegis cruiser USS Princeton triggered a sophisticated bottom mine located on the dark sea floor. The physics of a bottom mine are quite distinct because the device detonates on the sea floor rather than floating. This underwater explosion created a massive, rapidly expanding gas bubble that displaced a huge volume of the surrounding water. This powerful bubble lifted the heavy stern of the ship out of the water and then dropped it with incredible force. Engineers call this phenomenon whiplash, which can cause catastrophic damage to the entire frame of any modern warship today. The resulting shockwave instantly buckled the ship's steel keel and cracked the thick aluminum superstructure in several critical locations. It also severed the essential cooling manifolds that provided temperature control to the massive and expensive radar systems on board. In just a few milliseconds, a billion-dollar naval asset was mission killed by a single, cheap piece of underwater technology. This disaster brings us to the most critical system in naval warfare, which is actually not a weapon at all. It is the strict protocol of damage control that allowed the brave crews to survive despite the chaos around them. Panic was removed from the equation as the sailors executed their training with absolute precision and calm under immense pressure. The crews immediately executed zebra protocols, which involved isolating damaged compartments and shoring up the buckled steel bulkheads quickly. They worked tirelessly to bypass ruptured lines and restore combat power to the ship while still floating in the minefield. The Great Deception held perfectly as the enemy looked at the sea while thousands of soldiers raced across the sand. The trap was finally set, and now it was time to spring it with a synchronized architecture of extreme violence. Here is the tactical significance of the Anvil, which held firm despite suffering truly catastrophic structural damage from the mines. Neither of the damaged ships retreated because they were committed to maintaining the illusion of an imminent coastal invasion force. The Princeton restored its partial radar coverage within 2 hours, while the Tripoli remained on station to continue clearing mines. They held their position because they refused to leave their comrades behind or compromise the integrity of the mission. The adversary remained convinced that the invasion was imminent and kept their eyes fixed firmly on the blue horizon. While they watched the sea, 250,000 American soldiers were racing silently across the desert behind them. Every single system functioned not as separate entities, but as a single three-stroke engine designed to project power. This massive engine was designed to defend, project, and destroy, with an efficiency that had never been seen before now. The sequence begins with the most critical engineering challenge of all, which is the basic survival of the entire fleet. For decades, the nightmare scenario for the United States Navy has been the concept of anti-access and area denial. There was a persistent fear that cheap, land-based missiles could swarm and sink our most valuable and heavy capital ships. On February 25, 1991, that theory was tested for real, when the Iraqis detected the battleship Missouri near the coast. From a hidden battery on the FA Peninsula, the enemy launched 2 deadly HY-2 Silkworm missiles at the battleship today. The Silkworm is a mechanical beast carrying a massive 1,000-pound warhead that can easily break a large ship. It flies at subsonic speeds while skimming the waves to hide from the radar systems of the target naval fleet. As the Vampire call went out over the radio, the entire fleet had only a few seconds to react properly. The USS Missouri deployed clouds of aluminum foil chaff designed to confuse and divert the incoming missile's radar seeker. One missile took the bait and crashed into the water, but the second missile kept coming straight for the ship. This critical moment changed the history of naval warfare forever, as the British destroyer HMS Gloucester stepped into the fight. Operating alongside the Missouri, the Royal Navy crew engaged their Sea Dart missile system to intercept the incoming aerial threat. In a feat of split-second geometry, the brave Gloucester crew fired 2 missiles to destroy the target before impact occurred. This was the very first time in history that a warship had shot down an incoming anti-ship missile during combat. In 1991, this incredible intercept was a true miracle of point defense because it was basically a bullet hitting another bullet. The Sea Dart was a semi-active system which required the ship's radar to illuminate the target all the way until impact. Today, the threat has evolved significantly as we are no longer facing subsonic missiles like the old and slow Silkworm batteries. We are now facing hypersonic anti-ship ballistic missiles like the DF-21, which arrive at Mach 5 from deep space. These modern weapons approach from the edge of space at incredible speeds that a semi-active system simply cannot keep up with. To counter this, by 2026, we have deployed the RIM-174 Standard Missile, which is also known as the SM-6 system. This is not just a defensive shield for the ship, but is also a hunter that can track down its prey. The SM-6 possesses its own active radar seeker, which was originally derived from the advanced AMRAAM air-to-air missile technology. It does not need the mothership to hold its hand and provide constant guidance throughout the entire flight path. The system can engage dangerous targets over the horizon and intercept ballistic warheads while they are in their terminal phase. In the year 1991, the shield was mostly reactive, and we simply hoped we could shoot the threat down. However, in 2026, the shield is active, and we dominate the airspace before the enemy can even launch their weapons. With the shield now secure, the Navy had to project power inland to support the Marines pushing toward Kuwait City. But there was a major logistical problem, because the main air bases were hundreds of miles away in Saudi Arabia. The turnaround time for a jet to fly to the target and drop bombs was much too long for combat. The brave Marines on the ground needed immediate air support that could respond to threats in a matter of minutes. To solve this challenge, we must enter the world of the Gator Navy and their massive amphibious assault ships today. These ships were originally designed to haul Marines, but were quickly reconfigured to serve as small aircraft carriers instead. They became known as Harrier carriers, providing a unique tactical advantage that changed the way we conducted coastal warfare operations. This evolution ensured that the Navy could deliver precise firepower exactly where it was needed most on the battlefield today. The AV-8B Harrier II remains a fascinating engineering oddity because it is a vertical and short takeoff and landing aircraft. It uses advanced thrust vectoring nozzles to hover like a helicopter and fly forward like a traditional high-speed fighter jet. While it is not particularly fast and lacks a massive payload, it possesses one tactical advantage that trumps everything else. This advantage is proximity, because operating from ships just off the coast allows Harriers to fly extremely frequent combat sorties. They could maintain a turnaround time of just 20 minutes while delivering devastating fire support to the Marines on shore. The Harrier functioned as flying artillery that could respond almost instantly whenever a ground unit encountered any heavy enemy resistance. In 1991, the Harrier was a tactical stopgap that relied heavily on the pilot's eyes to find and destroy targets. These pilots were often vulnerable to ground fire as they flew low and slow over the dangerous Iraqi desert battlefields. Fast forward to the year 2026, where the old Gator Navy has evolved into what we now call the Lightning Carrier. The new America-class amphibious assault ships are specifically built to carry the sophisticated and stealthy F-35B Lightning II fighter. Like its predecessor, the Harrier, the F-35B can take off vertically, but that is where the physical similarity clearly ends. The F-35B is not just a simple bomb truck, but serves as a vital stealth sensor node for the fleet. It doesn't just support the Marines, but actively manages the entire battlefield using advanced data fusion and sensor sharing technology. The aircraft gathers gigabytes of sensitive data and beams it down to the brave troops fighting on the ground below. We have moved from simple close air support to true air dominance through the use of these integrated digital platforms. In 1991, the ship was merely a bus for soldiers, but in 2026, the ship is a floating supercomputer. Now we must arrive at the heavyweights to see how the Navy broke the Iraqi coastal defenses with sheer power. The heavy lifting of destroying these hardened defenses fell to the old gods of the sea, the legendary American battleships. From a modern engineering perspective, the 16-inch guns of the USS Missouri are ancient mechanical monsters from another era. These massive weapons were originally designed in the 1930s and rely on mechanical systems that seem archaic by today's standards. Each individual shell weighs approximately 2,700 pounds, which is roughly the weight of a standard Honda Civic car. When that heavy shell leaves the long barrel, it is traveling at supersonic speed toward its designated target many miles away. However, these shells are technically dumb objects because they have no internal guidance chips or movable fins to adjust their flight. It is simply a ballistic object that is governed purely by the strict laws of Newtonian physics after it is fired. Once the shell is launched into the air, it goes exactly where the complex mathematical calculations say it will land eventually. The main problem in 1991 was the horizon, because the powerful battleships could fire shells over 20 miles inland with ease. Despite this incredible range, the gunners on the ship could not actually see what they were hitting on the dusty battlefield. To solve this specific problem, the Navy improvised a clever solution that bridged half a century of advanced military technology together. They equipped the massive battleships with the RQ-2 Pioneer, which was a primitive but effective unmanned aerial vehicle for the time. The Pioneer looked like a flying lawnmower, and it was quite slow and loud as it circled above the enemy. It had to be caught in a large net on the back of the ship to land safely after its mission, but it gave the Missouri the one thing it lacked most, which was a pair of electronic eyes in the sky. It was the perfect marriage of massive kinetic energy and real-time surveillance that terrified the enemy forces on the ground below. On Philaka Island, this combination produced one of the most surreal moments in the entire history of modern military warfare today. A group of Iraqi soldiers heard the buzz of the Pioneer overhead and knew that heavy shells were about to follow. They did not surrender to a squad of Marines or a heavy tank, but instead waved white flags at the robot. This incredible event was the first time in history that human beings surrendered to a machine during an active combat operation. The 16-inch shell fired by the USS Missouri was the magnificent exclamation point that closed the era of battleship dominance. The era of the battleship ended because firing a dumb shell required a massive ship and a very slow spotter aircraft. In 2026, we have solved the problem of dumb iron by putting the robot directly inside the smart bullet itself. Today, the long-range anti-ship missile uses onboard AI and passive sensors to see the battlefield without relying on vulnerable GPS links. We have moved from the heavy hammer of the battleship to the precise scalpel of these modern and intelligent missile systems. To survive the chaotic terminal phase of combat, the Navy had to remove the slow human element from the firing loop. On the new Flight 3 destroyers, we are replacing the old Spy-1 with the much more sensitive Spy-6 radar. When the smoke finally cleared on February 28, 1991, the fourth largest army in the world had been liquidated very quickly. We blinded them, we deafened them, and then we destroyed them using the most advanced military architecture ever created by man. A microchip does not possess courage because the stealth fighter is just cold geometry without the brave pilot who flies it. This operation was the ultimate engineering statement, possessing the precision of a Swiss watch and the power of a massive sledgehammer. If you enjoyed this deep dive into naval engineering, please like this video and subscribe to the Navy Show channel now. History does not stop because the machine evolves, and the blueprint of modern global dominance is now finally and completely decoded.